Friends, welcome into Salt City Hoops. We made it. We finally made it to the end of this Utah Jazz season, and we are going to talk about this entire Utah Jazz season. My name is Russell Pereira, coming to you on this podcast or video, wherever you're consuming this content for Salt City Hoops. I'm so thrilled to be here, and we're done. 82 games. Plus preseason and all the summer league stuff and all the draft stuff that we did last year. It's over. We finally made it. And I consider the Jazz fans to be fortunate right now because unlike the past 3 years, the light is not at the end of the tunnel. We are at the light at the end of the tunnel. And it will be an odd sensation watching the playoffs this year. I'm very excited for this year's NBA playoffs. I am not just a Jazz sicko. I'm an NBA sicko. I'm very excited for the playoffs. We'll do some playoff-related NBA general content. Mainly, it'll be Jazz-centric to kind of see like how the Jazz kind of stack up against these teams. One thing that David Locke was mentioning a couple weeks ago, or more recently than that, was that the Jazz have no chance against this iteration of the Nuggets or Spurs, the level of basketball they're playing at. I don't agree with that. But we will be watching this level of playoff basketball without the Jazz, but with we're at the end of the tunnel. And now we're in this weird waiting period where we're watching these NBA playoffs without the Jazz, knowing full well the Jazz are a playoff team next year. And no, I don't speak in platitudes of like, oh, the Jazz are aiming to be in a top 6 seed. Maybe they'll be in the play-in game. No, right now, as we sit here on April 12th, I'm recording this on just after the 30-point Lakers loss on the road in LA. This time, Kobe Bryant did not drop a quadrillion points in his last game. But as we sit here on April 12th, no, I'm just saying, well, the Jazz are making the playoffs next year. We're a top 6 seed. There's no question about this in my mind. I think it's a rebuttable presumption. Like, I'm presuming the Jazz are going to be a top 6 seed next year. I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm going to presume it. Until things go poorly, I'm going to assume that. So, it's weird seeing here at the end of the tunnel here, and now I don't know how to carry that metaphor further. Right? Are we, just because we got to the end of the tunnel, we're still driving to our destination a little bit, but at least we're not. Our cell phone reception has returned, right, or whatever. We've escaped the tunnel. Now we're waiting for a helicopter ride out of here. But we're waiting. Now it's just a weird waiting game, and this entire waiting game can get accelerated based on the NBA draft lottery in a month. But it's an odd waiting sensation. So I'm just filled with all sorts of emotions as we end this season. Maybe you are as well. The number one thing I'm thinking is that the amount of joy that this season brought me compared to prior years, especially last year, where you finish last year and especially after the lottery, you end up 5th instead of an obvious top number 1 pick in Cooper Flagg and an obvious future All-Star in Dylan Harper. Last season just felt very depressing the whole way through. I had no optimism. Ace Bailey in Summer League helped a little bit about that. Bryce Sensabaugh had a good Summer League. He did not really continue that this year in the regular games, but there was a lot of optimism. Like, oh, there's something going on here. Kyle Filipowski, Summer League MVP. But last season was a slog, and the summer was like, had some nice quirks to it, but you still were wondering, like, where are we really going? Had no optimism about Keontae George. And so this season brought joy, just incredible amounts of joy. And what we're going to do on this episode is I'm going to take you through the entire season. 82 games is a long time. This dates back all the way to October. We're going to talk about everything that happened this season of relevance. We're going to kind of do some I'm going to remind you of some things maybe you forgot about, or just highlight some things that I really care about that I think got lost in the shuffle, or just things that I really want this season to be remembered by. And yes, we're going to hit on the Jaren Jackson Jr. trade and the fine of the Jazz for tanking. We're going to get into the highlights for sure, but there's some other things that I think we want to mention. But in the wake of the joy I'm feeling about this season and the awkward waiting for the summer to get here and the anxiety about like what could be a fabulous lottery pick to really, really gas up this engine and go. This was also my first year really delivering a committed week-to-week show for Salt City Hoops of my thoughts. We took a week off here and there, like for the All-Star break, and a couple weeks ago for my spring break when the Jazz and their 10-day contracts, the season was petering out. My inbox was not rife with threats of why isn't there a show talking about the Bezem Bang acquisition. Well, you got one eventually talking about Anderson Garcia and Bezem Bang. Triple-double acquire Bezem Bang. We'll talk about that as a highlight, I'm sure. But I've been writing, doing some episodes for Salt City Hoops for a few years now. When I first started the show, shout out to Dan Clayton for even reaching out in the first place, asking if I wanted to write. And I like writing in between adding more children to this family and my demanding day job as an attorney. I am not a Gen AI writer. I like to write to get my thoughts out there, and it's a long process. And I liked writing, and I'm very proud of some of the stuff I wrote about. I like my irreverent voice sometimes, but I found that I was more comfortable with like the entire reason I want to get thoughts out there is because I sit here in Denver. I don't walk by Jazz fans. Lord knows my wife is sick of hearing my Utah Jazz thoughts. And I've always felt empty just speaking into the void on Twitter and now Blue Sky. Like it was, sometimes you get some fun engagement and it's whatever, but it just, I never got the type of back and forth with my fellow fans and fellow NBA watchers, if you're a Jazz fan or not, than when I would just record my thoughts. And it wasn't always on video, and I'm very comfortable just putting my face out there. I don't care if people know who I am or whatever. And it was this season that I kind of looked into, okay, I can commit to like just getting my thoughts out there on a weekly basis, because if I let the thoughts pile up, you start getting like anxiety about, well, I didn't cover this from 3 weeks ago or whatever. And it actually is a lot easier to just get them out weekly, just commit it and get it out there. I say all that to say, I have had so much joy talking with all of you. So many of you have responded in comments, mostly positive, some negative, and that's the entire point. I want to talk about my thought. Like my thoughts are trying to get out so people cannot just hear them in their ear holes, but engage and respond so I can have fun conversations, right? And I find that if you have a fun personality, typically the people who disagree with you are still going to be fun and pokey about it back. And I know we're a small little show, and the bigger the show, the more trolling the comments can be sometimes, but it hasn't been like that. It's been, you guys have been just brilliant fans with brilliant thoughts of your own, and the comments and the responses that we see on Twitter and Blue Sky and YouTube have just been fabulous, and even some Spotify comments as well, which has been fun. Thank you guys for listening this year. Before we get into the recap of the year, I really appreciate your time this year that you spent with me, either in your eye holes or as you're listening to a podcast, wherever you are, however you do it. I think I would have a difficult voice to listen to on 3x speed, but some of you speed demons out there probably speed through these podcasts at a mile a minute. And letting you know, while I've really enjoyed this year and sticking to a good cadence and getting a lot of episodes out there and learning how to make them better as well. I was mortified when my microphone was not correct last week. The off season is when I think Salt City Hoops really shines. I think Dan and Ken and Zarin and myself, I think we're pretty good game-to-game analysts, and I think Dan's good at everything personally. But I think our collective expertise is better than anywhere you're going to find on the internet, including from our fabulous collection of beat writers and former beat writers, on off-season planning, salary cap analysis, all that good stuff. So I'm a cap dork. Where all of us are salary cap dorks. I got a little bit of an attorney edge as well, right? Like we are your one-stop shop for off-season content, I think. Now, I love diversity of opinion, though, so I encourage you to go listen to all our other friends doing other podcasts, writing articles, wherever you want to get your infinite Jazz content. Jazz content, you should. And there are NBA national people who are just thriving as broader salary cap analysts and everything like that. But if you want a dose of Jazz fandom and a dose of irreverence to analyzing the Jazz offseason moves, who we should draft, how he fits into a rotation, planning out training camp, planning out summer league, all that kind of stuff, you're not going to find a better source for that than Salt City Hoops. I think I'm not terribly biased when I say that I think the collection of people we got doing Salt City Hoops stuff for the Jazz, it's top tier off-season dorkery. So keep subscribing to us through the off-season. We are not just going to wait until October to spin these up again. I'm going to be doing a lot of shows with our friends like Justin, with our friends like Dan and Ken, and whoever else that we pull up through the cobwebs to have a conversation with me about the Jazz this off-season, because this is it. This is, I think Sarah Todd wrote a great piece, a very great pointed piece. It was short at the end of this last game against the Lakers, saying like, yeah, now it's time, right? So like this offseason is not about like acquiring someone who might be useful 3 to 5 years down the road, or random people that you'll never hear from ever again, like Omer Yurtseven or something like that. We always remember a random. You never know on this show what random guy's going to come out of my mouth. I was not planning on talking about Omer Yurtseven today, and look at that, it just happened. Every player that is brought in is going to be acquired with the goal of, this is a championship contending team immediately. The Jazz let's reasonable, right? Like the Jazz are not an inner circle contender or something like that. But if you are going to presume that you're a top 6 team in the Western Conference, one injury here, one upset over there, all of a sudden you're contending, right? Like the Jazz best non-Stockton Malone season of all time, making the Western Conference Finals. Who's to say what would happen if the Warriors didn't upset the dominant Dallas Mavericks? The We Believe Warriors, right? So, and the Jazz drew that inferior Warriors team, dispatched them summarily. Although the only clip we ever see from that series is Baron Davis posterizing Andrei Kirilenko, which is, just fine by me, because that's a great dunk in front of the home crowd of Golden State, who at the time deserved a whole lot. I'm not sure they deserve a whole lot more anymore. They've had their fun. But this is a very important offseason. We're going to have you covered. I have very strong thoughts on what to do with the roster, which they actually don't have a whole lot of moves they can make because the available roster space and what type of players they need after adding the draft pick that is coming in this year. So, by the way, on that draft pick, just got a note, we ended up tied for the 4th worst record with Sacramento. So there will be a coin flip in a week or two that determines who actually will have the 4th versus the 5th set of lottery balls. Or it might be shifted a different way. I don't think it's just a coin flip to see who gets 4th and who gets 5th. But assuming it is like that, maybe it is like that. The minutia of how the lottery balls get split up on a coin flip is not super clear to me on the internet. But if the Jazz do lose that coin flip, because, the only team unluckier than the Jazz these days is the Kings. But let's say the Jazz lose that coin flip and are 5th, they would have a 99.4% chance of keeping their top 8 protected pick owed to Oklahoma City. Of course, if they win that coin flip and have the 4th best lottery odds, they have a 100% chance of keeping that pick. So just a little something to keep in mind on. And obviously, if it is a coin flip of that 0.6%, then the expected value is the Jazz have a 99.7% chance of keeping the pick now. So, look, I'm not I'm not betting on 000 roulette these days, but that seems like a good one. Seems like good odds to me. So keep subscribing, keep listening, make sure you got us going on, because I think you're about to get the best content that we have from Salt City Hoops this summer. That is to say, I love your feedback on what happened this season. I've loved all your responses to episodes on big moments this year. And let's walk through what happened this season. I don't know how long this is going to take. I'm going to try to keep it, we're going to try to keep the episode to an hour, but recapping an entire season can be hard. I'm not going to get into super details, but I might get on tangents. We'll see what happens. I will remember this season for lots of little moments, but there just will never be a bigger moment for me than Game 1 of this season. I live in Denver. I don't get to see the Jazz in Salt Lake City very often. I happened to be in Salt Lake City for work while the Jazz were for the home opener. So I got to go to the Jazz game. And I'm sitting there with my colleagues who are they all live in Salt Lake City, and they are familiar with the Jazz. Some are bigger Jazz fans than others. But for the most part, they're just not big fans. And they know the team is generally bad, but they're asking me all about my expectations for this year. And they're playing the Clippers, who are ostensibly a pretty good team, even with the aspiration Kawhi Leonard bullshit. Like they were supposed to be a pretty good team this year. So I said, guys, I'm just here, have a good time. Probably going to lose this game, but we'll see what happens. And the Jazz blew the doors off the Clippers. Now, at the time, we're thinking the Clippers are a 50-win team. And the Clippers eventually had a rocket ship end of the season. They had a good end of the season, but they had a very, very, very poor start to the season. So maybe this doesn't look as wildly impressive in retrospect. But I'm sitting there next to my colleagues, and they all heard a pregame spiel about how the Jazz are kind of like, probably not so good, and they're going to try to lose a bunch of games. Not in the first game of the season, but they're going to not exactly be trying super hard all year because they're going to try to keep that pick, and also they don't have a ton of talent on the team. Well, the Jazz go out to a 43-19 first quarter. You don't see teams winning quarters by 24 points, and certainly not the first quarter of the entire season. And I'm there live for. I'm losing my mind. I cannot believe the good fortune we have. Had pretty good seats, top row of the lower bowl, so just a great vantage point to really see the whole court, but be close enough to really feel the action. Very odd starting lineup in this first game. I think I'm not going to go through all 82 starting lineups. Good Lord. But I think the starting lineup of this first game is also memorable. And I think illustrative for next season. So the Jazz start Keontae George, Lauri Markkanen, and Walker Kessler. Check. We knew those guys were going to start. I was wondering if Keontae was going to be a full-time point guard, if Collier's going to get in the mix. Summer league for Collier wasn't super great. Preseason was okay. Nobody was super high on Keontae to be a full-time point guard. We'll see, but we knew he was going to start. But the fourth and fifth starters, we were thinking, well, Ace Bailey's got to start, right? He's the number 5 pick. He looked really good in preseason and in the summer, but he got a leg injury and a sickness and hadn't practiced for a couple weeks. And now I can't remember if he played in a lot of preseason games. I think he played in at least a couple. But the Jazz started Svi Mykhailiuk, which, if you go back and listen to my offseason recordings about expectations for the team, I was very down on Svi Mykhailiuk. I was not impressed last year. Very much a tunnel vision shooter. All the things that have plagued him every stop of the way in his NBA career as just a not good enough isolation bench gunner. And I was not thrilled to see, and not good enough defensively, right? Too small, not athletic enough. What is he actually doing? And he started over Ace Bailey. In that first game, had a lot of us questioning what was going on. Dan Clayton was a little bit more optimistic about Svi Mykhailiuk's presence and what he could do on the court than I was. He proved correct. I've come all the way around on Svi. I think he's had a great season. This is not going to be a Svi Mykhailiuk recap season. We're going to do some off-season recap grades as well, but Ace Bailey was not ready at the time, that we now know. The fifth starter was even more interesting, given how up and down the season has been, and that's Kyle Filipowski. What a vote of confidence to give Filipowski the start, and also not just the talent in how well Filipowski played in the summer and preseason, but also I think it was illustrative, like the Jazz are trying to play big. This is Lauri Markkanen, Kyle Filipowski, Walker Kessler. Holy cow. That's a huge lineup. And with Yusuf Nurkic on the bench, you knew that this wasn't just going to end up with Filipowski shifting to the 5. This is going to be a team that is consistently playing 2 large men on the floor at all times and starting 3. That third starter, could it have been filled by Bryce Sensabaugh? Could it have been filled by Isaiah Collier? We'll never know. But this is where they started, and it was immediately impactful. Again, they 43-19 first quarter ended up being a 31-point halftime lead, and the things we saw that game. The leading scorer of that game was Walker Kessler, 22 points. Now, with the blowout, the Jazz could kind of spread it around a little bit, but the game high scorer was Walker Kessler, who was a perfect 7 for 7 from the field, including 2 of 2 from 3-point land and 4 assists. This was also foreshadowing the 4 assists are foreshadowing of this Jazz offense for the first 40 odd games. 4 assists on it. And Walker Kessler only played 1 preseason game. He had something like 6, 7, 8 assists, some crazy high assist number. They were doing a ton of high-low passing, asking Walker Kessler to be the facilitator. Now, all of a sudden, I'm watching this game, I'm losing my mind, I'm having a few beers, I'm having, this is just a really good time, but I can't help but notice, the second point guard doesn't exist on the Jazz. What they're asking, if it's not a Keontae-led passing situation, this is starting with some high-low passing from Filipowski or Walker Kessler, giving Lauri Markkanen alley-oop dunks, or finding Svi Mykhailiuk for an open 3. That was weird. We hadn't seen that from Walker Kessler before. We kind of seen it from Yusuf Nurkic at earlier stops in his career, and foreshadowing, turns out that's what they were trying to do with a huge chunk of the offense. They weren't trying to make the entire offense out of it. They later did for Yusuf Nurkic. We'll get to that. But Will Hardy added a significant element of the offense to do all this high-low stuff because he wanted to play big, but in order to do that, he needed some of his big men to be able to pass more. Lauri Markkanen's not really a great passer, but also not just because Markkanen's not a great passer, but because Markkanen is a fabulous finisher. You want Markkanen finishing these plays, not facilitating them. So he put the ball in Walker Kessler's hands to make these plays, and he ended up he was great. Jumping right to it, we only got 5 games out of Kessler before he had season-ending shoulder surgery. And that was a blessing in disguise for a lot of different things. But before we get into the long-term outlook for Kessler, those 5 games were just fabulous, people. 17 points, 13 rebounds a game, and 3.5 assists per game. Again, this was not just a fluky Clippers game. He was diming people up in those 5 games. Intentionally, the plays were designed for it. It looked great. Now, shooting volume is almost as important as shooting accuracy from 3-point land. So Kessler shooting 6 of 8 from 3 in these 5 games is not super head-turning. It's still a major question mark because it really depends on what his percentage ends up in and how many threes he can shoot per game. It's a lot of words to say. I hope he shoots well, but if defenses end up being okay with Walker Kessler shooting threes, if he's only shooting 33% and only happens 1 or 2 times a game, then that doesn't help your offense. It is more helpful to your offense to make sure other players are shooting the ball in different ways, or having Walker Kessler shoot at the rim instead. The only counterpoint to that is, well, it helps keep Walker happier. If he gets to shoot 1 or 2 threes a game, and he can point to the percentages being like, look, I'm shooting 34% from 3. I should be allowed to shoot those because it's over 1 point of possession, which isn't the most efficient offense for us, but it's not super inefficient. So let me shoot them. Let me shoot my 1 or 2 or 3 threes a game to keep me happy. That is part of the ego of playing basketball, which may be fine. He shot a lot of those kind of threes in college. I think he shot like 27% from 3 in college at Auburn. But so in 5 games, he attempts 8 threes, makes 6 of them, and the stroke looks great. One thing you'll notice, I have a sick memory for this, for a very specific type of stupid video, and that is off-season workout videos. I remember a lot of off-season workout videos, and guys, Walker Kessler was doing 3-point training all off-season, and he was posting videos about it, right? He's been off social media quite a bit after his surgery. But the long-term impact of this, right? It's like, first of all, the Jazz were on a trajectory to be like quite good because Keontae was, after 5 games, something was different. It wasn't permanently different that we kind of accept now, but we knew that something was good. Lauri Markkanen looked really, really healthy and bouncy. Svi Mykhailiuk was having a good season as a good starter. Like, this looked like, oh shit, this might be a 35-win team, and we're losing our draft pick. And going from Walker Kessler to full-time Yusuf Nurkic, that's a great way to sink your defense from like a potential top 15 unit to you're a bottom 5 unit. That's a bottom 5 defense right away, because the Jazz have no other good defensive players. So that helped the tank. We'll get into other ways the tank was affected. But the Jazz were looking pretty frisky those first 5 games. And Kessler himself looked amazing. So losing him, didn't love it. And he's an emotional guy, and I worry about his disposition going into next year. Especially because the whole season started with not giving him an extension. And we've covered this 1,000 times. The Jazz didn't want to give him an extension because the Jazz needed to pay him after they used up their cap space for in the next summer. Like, procedurally, it didn't make sense to sop up the cap space by giving Kessler his money 8 months early. And now it's even more benefited because now the Jazz can play hardball at the restricted free agency table. He's a restricted free agent. Remember, it's not just, he can't just go wherever he wants. The Jazz have a say in all this. They can match any offer. But the Jazz can play hardball on the restricted free agent offer. And so will other teams, by the way. It's not just the Jazz playing hardball with Kessler. Like, other teams are going to do this. They're going to say, dude, you aren't exactly a healthy dude, and you just reconstructed your shoulder. Don't feel great about that. So maybe Walker Kessler goes from being like a high $20 million a year player, like 27, 28, 29, $30 million a year. Ooh, I don't think that's too high for a center these days, especially when he's your 4th best player. 5th best player, maybe, next year, if Ace Bailey continues to grow. Or what you think of Keontae, 4th, 5th best player, right? And now it becomes like, you know, buddy, you should probably accept this 4-year, $80 million offer. We're giving you $80 million of life-changing money because we're not sure if your shoulder fucking works, right? Like, I think that's a fair negotiation tactic. So we'll see what happens. I think that shoulder surgery is very good. Obviously, Walker wouldn't have done it if not for the good advice of his private training staff, the Jazz training staff, his agent or his family, monitoring the situation, being like, dude, you can't just play in pain every year. And the Jazz right now they're going to be set up to win later, but not right now. So take care of yourself so that when we get into next offseason, you can spin back up that training plan again, keep that 3-point shooting going. He shot 70% from the free throw line in those 5 games, which was a lot better than it has been. 70% is pretty good for him. 73, 75, would love to see that. Because he's a guy who's going to get fouled, so like making those trips actually painful for the defense instead of shooting 55%. He got hacked a few times in his career. So that surgery ended up just being a blessing in disguise for the Jazz. I would have loved to see the progression of our Jazz prospects, right? Like, what does Walker look like this year in year 4? But this was better for the Jazz long term. We'll get him on a slight discount probably. I would be stunned if the Jazz didn't try to bring him back with Jaren Jackson and Lauri Markkanen. Again, they started Kyle Filipowski. I think they're intending to say, we turn the ball over a lot. In today's NBA, the current analytics edge is the possession game. And we know that we're going to win the possession battle if we got Walker Kessler in there. And if we don't have Walker Kessler in there, it's going to be really hard to win the possession game. So anyway, Walker Kessler looked great over 5 games. Who knows if the 3-point shooting is real, but the passing is definitely real. Now, even after we lose Walker Kessler in the 5th game, the Jazz go 3-4, and it's about it's immediately like the Jazz looking competent with Keontae and Lauri Markkanen that the drumbeat does not stop, and instead it gets louder on 2 very annoying points that I'm going to pat myself on the back as hard as I can. I'm going to leave myself a bruise. That the local and national disposition, both local fans were freaking out about this and the national fans were freaking about this, that the Jazz were winning too many games. And what are the Jazz trying to do? Trying to do another flimsy-whimsy 30-win season, 35-win season. They're going to be too mediocre. They're not going to get a good draft pick. They need to tank better. And we are under 10 games in, and people are freaking out that the Jazz are going to lose their draft pick, or even if they don't lose their draft pick, they're going to pick 7th or 8th, and it's not going to be worth it. And we're going to have another mediocre pick and get a mediocre player. Because the Jazz recent history of drafting Taylor Hendricks, Cody Williams, etc. has not been bringing in a whole lot of stars. And so there's a lot of schools of thought here. The number one prevailing thing is trade Lauri Markkanen. Like, so it's the 2 things. Like, the Jazz have no plan. That was the thing. It all got distilled down to the Jazz don't have a plan. What is the Jazz plan? They're winning too many games. They're not going to win it. People like Zach Lowe were saying, the Jazz don't have a plan. What is their plan? Plan. What is their plan? The plan never changed, guys. And I was right. It would be organizational malpractice for the Jazz to lose their draft pick. They knew the assignment going in. Everybody knew the assignment going in. The Jazz also have correctly stated with this whole Lauri Markkanen bullshit that if Ace Bailey hits, if Keontae grows, if things go well with the prospect class, you bring in a top 5 pick next year, because assuming they knew the assignment, which they did, they were not going to lose their pick. You bring in this talent, it's a lot easier to get immediately back to playoff contention if you have Lauri Markkanen on the team than if you had, 3 first-round picks and Jaden Ivey. Ace Bailey ended up showing out. He looks great. He's going to be a good player. Keontae George had a fabulous season. If this was just Keontae George and Ace Bailey, no Markkanen, just a few draft picks, the Jazz don't trade for Jaren Jackson at the trade deadline. And we're going into next season saying, well, thank God we don't owe a top 8 protected pick to Oklahoma City anymore, but this team still sucks because the entire team is just Keontae George and Ace Bailey and Walker Kessler. This team sucks. And we got a top 5 pick, and it's, insert Cam Boozer or something. There's some figments of a young team growing, but they're going to lose 50 plus games. No, because we kept Lauri Markkanen and didn't trade him for a bag of basketballs. A bag of really nice basketballs, I'm sorry. The Jazz were immediately able to say, yep, we're a top 6 playoff team next year. Let's go. We're immediately competitive. So I always rolled my eyes at the national media trying to trade Lauri Markkanen because the Jazz were never getting good enough offers, and the Jazz, it leads into the second thing that even local people were getting obsessed about, which is the Jazz don't have a plan because they're keeping Lauri Markkanen. They just want to be weirdly bad, mediocre. And the Jazz absolutely had a plan. They nailed the plan. We're going to get a top pick. And we get to keep Lauri Markkanen, who loves it here. Lauri Markkanen sneakily getting up there in age. He's not a super old guy, but, I think we got 2 All-Star seasons left on him. Maybe 3, right? So I'm not saying Lauri Markkanen is going to be here for the long haul, but I think it was worth keeping him now for this immediate push. Lauri Markkanen by himself was not enough to win a whole bunch of games. Turns out I was right. Then I think the number one thing that everyone overrated or underrated, whatever direction I think is appropriate here, is I don't think Jazz fans appreciated how easy it is to tank. And we're going to get into the fine later and everything, but guys, players get shut down for shitty injuries all the time. Oh, you got a back, you got an ankle, whatever. It is easy to tank. Now, Will Hardy presented a big problem. He made it a lot harder to tank than was possible. But the Jazz handed the keys over to bad players, and they ended up losing a bunch of games. So I knew that Lauri Markkanen by himself was not going to be a problem. Anyways, that was a big, big, big portion of our November and December, guys. Ace Bailey had a great December, by the way. So everyone freaks out about the Jazz plan, not trading Lauri Markkanen. National media is hell-bent on trading Lauri Markkanen to Detroit. They want Lauri Markkanen on a good team so that the Jazz plan of losing a bunch of games will succeed. And then Keontae just keeps it going. He keeps being wildly efficient. This efficiency out of nowhere, largely due to free throw drawing. We have a little bit of a free throw merchant on our hands, but he was very, very efficient and he was very, very fun. Going back to that Clippers game, by the way, he hit some sort of buzzer-beating half-court shot or something like that, and it caused him to fall on the ground belly flop style. And the camera immediately zooms on his face and he does a bunch of eyebrows and a smile. He's such a clown, dude. His clown behavior when he was bad is really rubs you the wrong way. But when he's good, it's just it's bubbly. It feels good. I complete 180 on Keontae George. I'm sorry I was wrong. He's great. But he has a great December. Ace Bailey then gets a lot more minutes in December and he ends up scoring 12 points a game in December, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, and on 52% field goal shooting and 39% from 3 with a few studly outings. Ace Bailey has not been good since March. He's been good since December. He's a rookie, so there's some bad games in there, but there are a lot more good games than bad games. So we end up in this December area where we're oh, this team is something. Yes, I think the Jazz are going to keep their pick. They're going to lose enough games. But right now, they're trying to see how good they can be. So the gas pedal's fully down. They look great. They don't have Walker Kessler. So every game they're going in knowing there's a good chance we're losing this game anyway because we don't have any defense. But let's figure out the figments of what this offense is. And maybe next year we'll figure out the defense. And what I said earlier is they added a portion of the offense, a significant portion of the offense was dedicated to, we don't really have a whole lot of ball handling on this team. We have Keontae who looks a lot better, but still not, you still don't want to make him do only point guard passing stuff. He's a good enough scorer. You want him to do stuff. And Isaiah Collier is up and down as a pure point guard. He's okay, but there's not really anyone else on the team who can do it. Walt Clayton's a rookie, and his passing skill left a lot to be desired. He left a lot to be desired on everything, by the way. So they had a significant portion of the offense dedicated towards, well, passing can come from our centers, Walker Kessler and Yusuf Nurkic. So that'll be a chunk of our offense. Well, they went on a hilarious 3-game stretch in December where Will Hardy said, well, what if we make the whole plane out of Yusuf Nurkic passing? And guys, we fought for so long waiting for the Jordan Clarkson triple-double after years and years and years and years and years, 8 trillion years, waiting for the next Jazz triple-double in the regular season. Ricky Rubio had one in the playoffs, but we're waiting eons for the next regular season triple-double. We get a random one from Jordan Clarkson, and then Yusuf Nurkic rips off 3 in a row because the Jazz decide, hey, you know what we're going to do? We're going to make this, we're going to build this whole plane out of Yusuf Nurkic high-low passing. So I want to give a major shout out to Yusuf Nurkic. In retrospect, this feels exactly like the Bogdanovich-Kelly Olynyk trade, where something on paper looks like shit. We traded Colin Sexton, and we had to give up a second-round pick to get Yusuf Nurkic, who was poor performing malcontent in Phoenix and Charlotte. We traded with Charlotte, but he did not like being in Phoenix. He didn't like being in Charlotte. And we traded a promising-ish young point guard who, like, Sexton's going to be in the league for a long time doing what he does. Trading it for a guy who doesn't want to be anywhere and is 31 years old. Major injury issues in his past. And for a bad team, what I was worried about the most was, can Will Hardy keep it together for one more year? Can he keep the good times going for one more year where everyone is just still generally happy to be around Utah despite the losing? And adding Yusuf Nurkic, I was like, this is not going to work. It super worked, guys. Will Hardy's got some sort of magic touch. Will Hardy also got Kevin Love to not demand a buyout and spent his entire year loving his presence on the Jazz. That both Nurkic and Kevin Love, I know we just finished the season and we've had great moments with them, so I'm perhaps overrating their likelihood of coming back. But I just don't see why you wouldn't bring them both back on cheap deals. I don't think Yusuf Nurkic at 32 years old is going to have a ton of money out there. I was initially thinking like, he's 10, 12, $14 million a year player. I don't think that those offers are going to be out there for him in free agency. So I think both he and veteran Kevin Love are going to come back. So major shout out to Yusuf Nurkic, and I think Will Hardy gets some credit to this as well, that Yusuf Nurkic came in and even playing behind Walker Kessler for a spell was a happy guy who knew his role because he knew that he was valued for what he did and not what he didn't do. He misses bunnies around the rim. He's not a good defender. He never was a good defender. He's certainly not now. Fabulous rebounder, though. Really, really good rebounder. If you look at the offensive and defensive ratings with Yusuf Nurkic as the center, they're not good. The defensive rating is horrendous. But the offensive rating is also pretty bad. But how often was Yusuf Nurkic playing with like the full complement of good players? Like, I'm more curious to see what he'll look like with a team. Like if he's playing with Jaren Jackson Jr. on the bench, right, or something like that. More of a sensible bench lineup. If his teams can be, there's no reason that Yusuf Nurkic at center offense can't be at least average, but he was out there playing with garbage a lot of the time, so we'll see. Who's to say if he would be this happy if Walker Kessler didn't get hurt and Nurkic was only playing 15 minutes a game? But it's clear from his quotes that it was more about the team environment and what Utah was providing him and what Will Hardy was providing him than straight up minutes per game. And so I just credit to everyone involved there. That Nurkic ended up having a happy season and a successful season. I would enjoy having him back. We go through December and January, and the trade deadline draws near, and we're doing some podcasts. We're talking about some small little trades going on. Cody Williams starts showing up a little bit. Like, he's not a useless player. Taylor Hendricks was still having a very, very disappointing season, but we were all just kind of accepting, it's going to take a year for him to come back from injury. But January was when I started poking the bear, saying, like, I don't like his general on-court disposition. Like, this is not the same guy we drafted. Like, this is not just, we'll wait another year for Taylor Hendricks. Like, this is the NBA. This is not the G League. You have to show us, like, if you're on the court, you're not, like, hobbling through an injury. No, you're supposed to be fully recovered, and it wasn't just getting his wheels under him bad. It just didn't look great at all. While Clayton looked okay as a passer, pretty underwhelming as a shooter, really bad defensively, I really had always hated the Walt Clayton is a bulldog, so he's going to really help the defense. The dude is a little guard. How much do you think he's going to have defensively? And yeah, he's a rookie guard. He's going to look bad defensively regardless of his acumen. But he looked really bad defensively. Whatever. Bryce Sensabaugh was having a horrendous... He shot over 40% from three last year and couldn't hit a shot to start this year. And when Bryce doesn't hit shots, he starts doing stupider things on both ends of the court. And it was really ugly for Bryce for a long time. And he finished out with his percentages looking okay. Gonna have to think about Bryce's role going forward. But, like, flipped in, yes, he started that first game. He did not start many games thereafter until the Jazz started tanking. He looked okay up and down. Flip was hurt. Out of everybody who got hurt by the Walker Kessler injury, it was Kyle Filipowski. Because Kyle Filipowski ends up having to play a lot of center. And at this point, we still had Kyle Anderson on the team. And Kyle Filipowski was so bad as a defensive center that when it came to defensive assignments and defensive structure, we were playing Kyle Anderson as the center than Kyle Filipowski. Interesting. And Kyle just ended up having to play a lot out of position this year. And I don't agree with those who see an actual role for him next year, or that he has the most defined role on the team next year, or a defined role on the team next year. I think he's still bad enough that this is a guy who's not in the opening night rotation. And if one of Lowry Markin and Jaren Jackson or Walker Kessler is out for a game, I think they cobble together the front court minutes without one of those guys, without adding minutes to Filipowski. I think they end up playing Ace Bailey up to the 4, right? Or if we have DeBonsa, right? Like, he plays, like, they're going to cobble together a front court if they're missing one guy or even two guys. It's not until you start missing multiple front court options on a given game that I think you get Filipowski some minutes. Because he's limited to only playing one position. And it's a position that he's not even all that good at, right? He's a tweener 4-5. One of the worst places you can be in the NBA. So I think he's a very difficult fit on the floor, even though I think he's progressed pretty decently. We'll get into off-season grades and all that kind of thing. I want to shy away from, like, every thought I have about Kyle Filipowski. But January is when we were just kind of like, we're really still not getting a ton of progression out of these young guys, huh? Isaiah Collier, too, is significant improvement, I think, from first year to second year for reading the offense and not doing the stupidest ever turnovers for Isaiah Collier. But it's still, you're looking at January looking like all these guys' biggest problems are still there. Collier can't shoot, still not good enough defensively. Filipowski can't shoot. That's got to get better. Not good enough defensively and is playing wildly out of position. Where did Bryce Shashak go? Oh, by the way, also really bad defensively. Cody Williams, doing some interesting things as an on-ball defender, but also kind of spaces out as a defender sometimes. Cutting a little bit, shooting 20% from 3, still has wallflower moments. Taylor Hendricks, pretty much bad all around unless you're asking him to do a spot up 3. So this entire prospect class, you're sitting there going like, these guys might be okay rotation players, but this is just the future doesn't look super great. But our All-Stars looked fabulous, guys. We hit the All-Star break, and we were having legitimate, every honorable mention list had Keontae George listed as a potential All-Star. So with a couple injury replacements, Keontae George would have been an All-Star this year. 24 points, 4 rebounds, 6.5 assists on 46% from the field, 38% from 3, 89% from the free throw line, and that 89% from the free throw line comes with a lot of free throws. He's looking like an actual star. And the advanced stats on his defense are in the toilet. I saw a much, 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 much different Keontae George defensively this year. A guy who knew the defense, right? I just feel like that's step one for so many professional NBA players is, do you know what the defense, do you know what the scouting report is? Do you remember what you did in shoot around? And so many of these guys would piss me off about basic shoot around game plan deficiencies that would make Will Hardy want to blow the roof off the Delta Center. I'm sorry, just Delta Center. That is the official marketing thing, by the way. It's not the Delta Center. It's just Delta Center. It's ridiculous. Keontae executed defense pretty okay. And I think you can cobble together a top 20, 15 defense with him as your worst defensive player. And if you have a lineup of Keontae George, Ace Bailey, Lauri Markkanen, Jaren Jackson Jr., Walker Kessler, he's your worst defender. Ace Bailey was a remarkable rookie defender this year. Not the best ever. He's not Colin Murray Boyles out there. Murray Boyles had a fabulous defensive season overall. I'm saying Ace Bailey had a fabulous defensive rookie season. He's really, really good. So I think he's going to be even better next year for all the reasons. And Lauri Markkanen's back, right? His shooting wasn't super awesome. Only 36% from 3 before the All-Star break. But 89% from the free throw line. And once again, a lot of free throws. I think at one point, Lauri and Keontae were number 2 and 3 on free throws drawn per 36 minutes or something like that. Just crazy, crazy numbers. Because being second or third in the NBA on those stats means you're going up against the Sheas and the Lukas of the world, the Jokic's of the world, who draw a ton of fouls. It's remarkable. It was remarkable. And as far as his three-point shooting, we know what Lauri is as a three-point shooter, and he was often asked to shoot very difficult threes. He would have weird, 1 of 10 nights, and I just don't think that's him, but he looked healthy. The number one thing I looked for Lauri this year is he was shooting fabulously at the rim. Right, and he wasn't shooting well at the rim last year. Whether it was injury-based, because the entire team sucked, so he was making lots of poor decisions around the rim because the entire offense was just him doing dumb stuff. He looked great. We had 2 actual All-Stars. None of them made the All-Star game. That's fine. It is what it is. I was hoping Keontae would play a little bit more to get on some most improved player ballots, but he didn't play enough games, and that's fine. So, the Jaren Jackson Jr. trade happened, and the reason I'm saying that perhaps less climactically than you would think is because I want to take stock of the team before the Jaren Jackson Jr. trade, and going back to my rant that I just had about how I was right that the Jazz did not need to freak out about their plan or losing their draft pick. The team at the time was 7th or 8th worst record in the NBA. And below them, worse than them, were the Clippers, the Pelicans, and 1 or 2 other teams. But the Clippers and the Pelicans had all the incentive in the world to win because they didn't own their draft pick. And the Jazz were not making the playoffs. So I know what's going to happen. You can't just extrapolate what happened in the first 40 to 50 games and say they're going to win that many games for the second half of the season. No. We were going to shut Lauri and Keontae down. And if that doesn't work, we'll shut Nurkic down. If that doesn't work, we'll shut everyone else down. So I knew the Jazz were going to slip to fifth. I've always said the Jazz were going to win 25 games this season. I think my official over-under prediction for them was 27. But when the Jazz got to this point, I was like, I think they're going to win 25 games. The goal of the 25 or 27 wins was to finish fifth worst in the NBA. And we saw more bad teams this year than we ever thought possible. Indiana came out of nowhere to be not just bad, but like, holy shit, they're awful bad. I thought Indiana would be a regular bad 30 to 35 win team. And the Pelicans, with all the incentive in the world to win, couldn't win. Starting out with Willie Green as their coach and had no defensive principles whatsoever. Really bizarre season for New Orleans. And then the Clippers, obviously, like, they have no other choice but to make the playoffs. And Kawhi Leonard was having a fabulous year. James Harden was having a very good year. It was weird that they were losing as many games as they did. So once again, we get to the All-Star break, and everyone's still kind of freaking out that the Jazz are going to lose their pick. And I feel like I was one of the only voices out there who was saying, guys, the Jazz are going to win like 4 more games. And they figured out a way to do it at the end of the day. But not before they made a trade for Jaren Jackson Jr. And the first thought is like, well, I hope he doesn't play too many games. But the taking stock of the team, you're thinking Keontae, Lowry, Markkanen, and Walker Kessler. Like, if Keontae is all-star level, guys, like, these are 3 top 60 players. Lowry's looking like a top 25, top 30 player, top 25. Walker Kessler's easily a top 60 player. And Keontae's looking like a top 50, 60 player. Wow. Higher than that for Keontae. If he's an all-star consideration, top 40, we'll see. So this team is good. Ace Bailey's starting to really come out. You're just seeing some real stuff out of Ace Bailey. Get a good draft pick. This is a 42, 40. We're a playing quality team next year. And then you go out and you get Jaren Jackson Jr. I swear that trade is going to make me levitate. Gave a small handful of okay first-round picks, right? The best of the picks next year between Cleveland, Minnesota, and Utah, which, if all of Cleveland, Minnesota, and Utah are at least pretty decent, that should be a not great pick. And maybe one of those teams has a bad year. Maybe it becomes a 10th pick or something like that. I don't think Cleveland's going to completely bottom out. Even if they lose Donovan Mitchell, I think they have enough structure to build a contending, like a playoff or play-in contending team. Minnesota's going to be good next year as long as they have Anthony Edwards around. And if Anthony Edwards has a catastrophic injury, they have the team infrastructure to be a 500 team. And Utah's going to be good next year, so that's whatever. The Lakers, top 4 protected pick in a couple years. A couple years. And then one other pick, I forget which one that one was. But it was the third pick was not the most exciting one either. Again, a decent pick. I forget which one it is, like Phoenix, I think. Phoenix unprotected in 2031, I think. Which, again, if the Suns don't have any incentive to lose games, then they're going to be like the Pelicans and continue to try to win. So maybe they'll be completely drawing dead, and no matter what they do, they'll be a bad team in 5 years. Either way, it's 5 years from now. Those are fine picks. And we traded Taylor Hendricks, Walt Clayton. I think Taylor Hendricks was bad. He could make me eat my socks later. We'll see. He's got a long career ahead of him. Very nice man. Wish the best for him. Not sweating losing him. And Walt Clayton, who might have a 10-year career as Seth Curry, Patty Mills. Right? And he already had a 4-year college career, so he's a little on the older side. Not sweating losing that either. And Kyle Anderson, who, I mentioned all that about Yusuf Nurkic being a happy guy. I I saw Kyle Anderson in person here in Denver. Kyle Anderson, I think, hated being in Utah. I think he really, really, really hated it. He was not the most happy to go along to get along kind of guy. The 3 games that Jaren Jackson Jr. played with Lauri Markkanen, right? With Yusuf Nurkic, with Keontae George. Oh, the Jazz look so good, guys. They look so good. And they looked so good that the Jazz benched Lauri Markkanen and Jaren Jackson Jr. in the fourth quarter of a pair of games. And the Jazz get fined $500,000 for conduct detrimental to the league. Remember, not a direct violation of the player participation policy. And note that the Jazz did not appeal this $500,000 fine for conduct detrimental to the league for benching Lauri Markkanen and Jaren Jackson in the fourth quarter of a couple games. The second of which the Jazz won. Because Bryce Sensabaugh had a great game in the fourth quarter, and the Miami Heat couldn't get out of their own way and lost the game. Bam Adebayo, 83-point scorer, he played in that game. Couldn't beat the Jazz in the fourth quarter. Couldn't beat the zombie Jazz in the fourth quarter of a game that mattered. Seems like a you problem, Miami, not a Utah problem. I said at the time that everyone knows what the Jazz deal is, that in no event should they win enough games to give up their top 8 protected pick. Keontae George had a wonderful interview with Zach Lowe. It was a lengthy interview, and he disclosed to a direct pointed question from Zach Lowe, you guys owe your pick, top 8 protected, to Oklahoma City. What do you think? Like, are you going to try to lose games? It's kind of difficult for you guys to win games right now with that in mind. And Keontae said, like, we know the organizational goals or something to that effect. Of like, we know the broader picture. We know what the long-term vision and plan is. We're not worried. But like if we lace him up and we're put on the court, we know what we're trying to do. The Jazz are resting Yusuf Nurkic at random points now. Right? Like Yusuf Nurkic was randomly not playing a few games. The goal to say, like, we're going to put Kyle Filipowski at center, and if you guys can't beat us when we're putting up a 125 defensive rating or whatever horrible number it is, then we don't know what else we can do tanking-wise. But I said at the time, like, if the Jazz have organizational goals that all the players are on board with, that's why I brought the Keontae thing, because the players are on board with the tank. They know the organizational goals. They know what bringing in one more draft pick at a cost-controlled salary can do for your team building and championship aspirations. Players are smarter now than they ever, ever, ever have been before about what the realities are for building a team. And I've struggled to finish the started thought, so let me just get it out there. I said at the time that it's better for a fan to see Jaren Jackson Jr. and Lauri Markkanen lace him up for 20 minutes in the first half of a game and then get benched in the fourth quarter, and you treat the entire thing like a preseason game where you get to see your guys run and jump and do some cool things and maybe get some lineups together, start piecing together what the future might look like with these guys and have some fun with it, then have a player have a made-up injury. I just would rather see my guys out there than not. Well, the Jazz got fined. We had a whole week of discussion. This happened at the All-Star break basically, around the Super Bowl too. So we just had a week of conjecture about Utah Jazz this, the Utah Jazz that. The Pacers also got fined $250,000 for basically doing a similar thing. Although theirs was considered a direct violation of the player participation policy, which by the letter of the law actually looked like it. But it was just tanking, anti-tanking. What the Jazz are doing is breaking the integrity of the NBA. Oh my God, the I word, integrity. How dare the Utah Jazz prioritize their long-term vision over the integrity of the matchups. Yeah, the Jazz are treating these like exhibition games. Get over it. They're not making the playoffs. Who gives a shit? This happens every year. Every year we have 3 to 8 teams tanking. And the reason the Jazz, the wheel ended up spinning on the Jazz at this time was because this was a very bizarre year for tanking, that we had multiple teams, for one reason or another, more than usual, had reasons to really deflate their win total, whether it be Indiana having a surprisingly bad year and they didn't have Halliburton, so they really took off the gas pedal, especially when they even got more injuries, like losing Johnny Furphy and losing Nesmith for a little bit, losing Opie Toppin for like 3/4 of the season. The Pacers really took their foot off their gas pedal. You have the Wizards and the Jazz both owing top 8 protected picks, so like they really want to make sure they're not around that range. Who are the other surprises? I'm drawing a blank here, but there's a couple other teams that were surprisingly really bad, and then when they were surprisingly really bad, they just let go of the rope. Sacramento, right? We all thought that's a team that is always trying to win, even to their own detriment, right? Turns out they actually did at the end of they did exactly that at the end of the year. But with their talent, Levine, Sabonis, DeRozan, signing Dennis Schroeder, like we thought that they would be about a 35-win team at least, right? And they weren't. So the games, there were just an increased quantity of tanking teams than usual. And that's why it felt bad. And the Jazz did the most egregious thing of all, which was, well, we're just not going to play our best players in the fourth quarter, which I just felt like was preferable to what happened immediately thereafter. I think Jaren Jackson played one more game after that. Or maybe he didn't play a game. I know he played 3 games total. Either way, immediately after this, turns out Jaren Jackson Jr. has a tumor in his knee that needs to get surgically removed, and he's out for the season. Turns out Yusuf Nurkic has a facial fracture or some sort of facial, like a deviated septum or something. He needs face surgery. He's out for the season. So these are 2 injuries that could have been dealt with in the offseason, but because the NBA forced Utah's hand, they said, well, these guys are just out for the season. So we only got to see Jaren Jackson for just a little bit, guys, but oh, wow, that looked really good. Lowry Marketing got a hard fall at practice, and he got boo-boos on his knee and his leg, and then he'll be reevaluated in 2 weeks, and he got reevaluated again. They got reevaluated again, and then we never saw him again. Keontae George, to his credit, actually severely strained his hamstring in a game. He was chasing down a fast break defense or something like that, going for like a chase down block or something like that, and he pulled up lame as he tried to stop. So that's when it's like, oh, as soon as you saw that, you're like, oh, that's a 3-month injury. and actually, if the Jazz were competitive, they might have kept him out until like last week because it looked like a bad hamstring strain. The Jazz got fined for tanking. It's not the first ever tanking fine in the NBA, but it was the first ever conduct detrimental type of thing where for a reason of, oh, the coach decided not to play the guys in the fourth quarter, so we're going to fine them for what is obviously anti-competitive behavior. Just a bizarre thing to target Utah for. And everyone was talking about Bobby Marks throwing around the integrity word. Meanwhile, you got Giannis Antetokounmpo having a, on top of all of his other bullshit nonsense that ruined Milwaukee's season, he's getting in bed with Kalshi, the prediction market company. Nonsense. Total nonsense. And it was from those injuries, the Jackson surgery, the Nurkic surgery, Lowry and Keontae being out, that the attention got focused squarely on the prospects that I mentioned earlier having mass seasons. Collier and Filipowski and Sensabaugh, Cody Williams. Ace Bailey started to get a lot more attention and started playing great. But those mad prospects, it was like, all right, this is your last chance. This is your last chance to get unfettered minutes of basketball. Start showing some things with you as the focal point or new skills that you're developing. And Cody Williams showed the most. Raised his hand and said, look, I've learned some new tricks. I'm going to show them. And he didn't become like this dominant first round lottery pick or something like that. But he was the first one to say, I've learned some things that I think will be applicable to a more competitive environment. Great. Isaiah Collier, 20 assists game. He showed a new skill, which is very, very important for him, that I can't shoot the ball, but if you give me the basketball, I know all the tricks of the trade, or I'm learning all these new tricks that I've learned about how a non-shooter with the ball, if he's a good enough passer and a good enough driver, can create amazing offense. And he was showing all sorts of amazing things, right? If you're sagging off a ball handler and that ball handler has speed and vision, he can carve you up, right? He doesn't just have to shoot wide open threes. He knows how to use angles and screens so that if you set a screen and you don't switch it or something like that, well, you're just giving your roll man a wide open lane, right? He's going to find a way around that screen, and because he doesn't actually have a defender on him, that defender can get backpicked by somebody else, and now you got a free roll man going down the middle of the lane. These little things, right? That's a very easy example, but there are so many ways that a point guard can do that, and he showed some new things. Kyle Filipowski did a lot more of his usual, can score, can rebound, a little bit of feistiness defensively, but just still playing out of position. Shows that, hey, I can compete and play against NBA bodies, and so I'm not useless. I'm not Tyler Hansbrough out there, but I really got to be in a good situation. And Bryce Sensabaugh was just like the most obvious role for me, sure, but just had a lot more disappointment of when his role was stretched too far offensively, he just became a worse and worse player and on both ends of the court. And so you just didn't get stunned by any of them, except you love to see that Cody Williams might not be a useless bag of flour out there. There's actually might be a player worth picking up a fourth option if he has a good summer, if he has a good training camp. I say Collier kind of showed I can do backup point guard things. You don't have to give up on me. Let's keep this train going. So we'll see. Ace Bailey had just a fabulous end of the year. I'm not going to get into that. We're getting a little long in the time here, so I'm not going to give all the numbers I have prepared for Ace Bailey. We just did a recent Ace Bailey episode. Dan Clayton has written a ton about Ace Bailey on saltcityhoops.com. Ace Bailey should be first team all-rookie. I think it'll be a really confusing disappointment if he isn't. The only reason Ace Bailey wouldn't be a first team all-rookie guy is if way too many national writers see that he didn't start the first 15 or so odd games of the season and say, well, oh, so he's a bust. He couldn't start for Utah, so he's a bust when he started nearly every other game after that. And fabulously so, looking really good doing so. The Jazz signed a bunch of nonsense bullshit players to close out the season. Shout out to Anderson Garcia, Bazem Bang, Kennedy Chandler, who we actually needed because we needed someone who could play point guard when Isaiah Collier went down for the last 10 games or so of the season. And I'm already forgetting the player we signed for today. Yeah, Hayden Gray. We signed Hayden Gray for one game, and he played 20 minutes today against the Lakers. We sent him to a 2-year non-guaranteed deal, so we'll probably see him in the summer. He looks like Will Hardy 15 years ago, so that's a little scary to me. And I thought playing these bullshit players who were not even good G League players a ton of minutes was worse for the fan experience than if Lauri Markkanen played 18 minutes in the first half, right? And then not in the second half. We were all subject to way too many minutes of Bazem Bang and Anderson Garcia. But shout out to Bazem Bang. I'm actually going to know, I've shit on this guy for weeks now. I got to give a quick little shout out. He's looked pretty a lot better over the past couple weeks. Way more confidence with his dribbling and where he's supposed to be on the court. He's actually moving he's a lot faster than he showed the first couple weeks. So there's some like verve there a little bit. Can't shoot a lick, but was really getting lots of steals and has a little bit more ball handling chops than he initially displayed. And the man got himself a triple-double. And so did our friend that we got in the Jaren Jackson Jr. trade. John Conchar also got a triple-double. First time in NBA history that two players got triple-doubles off the bench. John Conchar's triple-double is also on the heels of his other triple-double. So he had two triple-doubles back-to-back. He's on the roster next year for like $6 million. He'll surely still be on the team unless he's included in some sort of salary matching dump trade or something like that. I don't think he'll be waived or anything like that. So he's a net positive to the locker room. So having guys like Conchar and Kevin Love around could be pretty good for the team. We'll see what happens to those guys next year. But just want to note that as I was writing down my notes for the year, I did this like a couple games ago, and then we got those two triple-doubles in the same game off the bench. Never before done in NBA history. And Bang seems like a nice guy. I'm sure his entire family listens to me talking about why I'm mad that we signed him. And apologies to Bez and Bang's family. And got to see John Conchar having some fun. Ace Bailey looked good to close out the season. I think he got really, really tired the last few games. I've kind of like, I take nothing away from these past few games. Once the clock turned into April, I'm like, these games don't matter. These players are exhausted. They're not shooting well. And then they played an even more of a joke Memphis team and blew them out by 50,000 points. Good to see the guys have a little bit of a taste. It's good to have a taste of victory every once in a while. I do believe that for a tanking team. Is like every once in a while you do have to beat one of the fellow tankers so that you can go home and be like, hey, we did some guys look pretty good out there today, and we had some fun doing so. And the locker room morale thing is actually pretty real, so that they're going to do all the exit interviews with coaching staff and all that good stuff and Jazz brass like the Ainges and Justin Zanuck. And having a couple recent wins is not the end of the world. Everyone's happy with where this team is going. Shout out to everybody on this team. So now the playoffs are here. The Jazz season is over. I can't believe the Jazz season is over, guys. In part because, like, the bad is over. The bad is over. We're going to have a lot more to say about why it's now more stressful. Like, having expectations is stressful. It hurts the heart. But that's why we're sports fans. We want the stress. We don't want to coast to this stuff. And we don't want to watch bad season after bad season. Give us something stressful to cheer for. We want to see, all right, Jazz matching up against the Spurs and Victor Wembanyama. Can they even remotely hang? We're back. And now it's just 6 long months of waiting, but we have some very interesting points along the way. We got the lottery next month. Let's have good fortune and get a great player added to this team. Remember, all rookies are pretty much bad, but like a star talent in a bench role on this Jazz team, learning a few discrete NBA skills and like growing up and then eventually like replacing Lauri Markkanen in 2 years, right? 2 or 3 years, like that's how you become an Oklahoma City dynasty. Is you add and the Spurs adding Dylan Harper and playing him as the sixth man. Like, are you kidding me? That's how you build a dynasty. And so the Jazz are just in terrific position to do so. So we got the lottery. Hopefully we get somebody. We got the actual draft. The Jazz only have the 1 pick, so we got to make it count, right? So if we end up picking 6th, 7th, 8th, oh man, not the pick we were hoping for, but you have to nail that pick. Have to nail it. So it's a stressful lottery, and the Jazz got some cap tools this summer to make this team even better. I just mentioned I'm just feeling so blah about the prospect class on the Jazz roster right now that I'm certainly looking at the available mid-ish tier free agents and saying, can you help us more than Bryce Sensabaugh? Can you help us more than Kyle Filipowski? Are you a better backup point guard for a playoff team than Isaiah Collier? We're certainly going to look at all these different offseason options because the Jazz are not without flexibility. The Jazz also have a restricted free agent mess to deal with. Walker Kessler. What is his number going to look like? We're surely going to be able to bring him back on whatever number he ends up being at. No team's going to offer him some sort of crazy max contract that we can't match. But as soon as his number comes in, it affects what you're thinking about the Jazz roster planning for next year and the year after and the year after that, because that's when these things start to snowball and become problems instead of just expensive, right? Because of cap management. And there are rules here. This isn't Nam. And then I think a sneaky, under-discussed item is Keontae George is eligible for an extension. That's going to be a tough negotiation, and for a player who's had one amazing season and I think has great vibes with Will Hardy and everything and has great vibes with the Utah Jazz staff, coming to an agreement on an early contract extension is a tough conversation. I think the Walker Kessler discussion is easily hand-waved away because you can say, look, it's obvious to anyone who cares about how you build a team that Walker Kessler extension was never happening unless he took a crazy discount, which even the Jazz would be like, you shouldn't take this discount. Just wait until next year and we'll pay you, right? But for players so next summer, that's not going to be an issue that affects the Keontae George negotiation. That's going to be straight up, how much is Keontae George worth or not worth? And having that discussion early can be fraught on player management tensions. But that's the business of the NBA. Like many star players go through this. This is not going to be the first time. They end up having happy careers with their teams. But one notable player who couldn't come to an agreement on an extension was Gordon Hayward. And I wrote an entire piece saying that the Walker Kessler extension failure was not at all analogous to the Gordon Hayward situation. If Utah can't come to an agreement with Keontae George, it is a lot more in that Gordon Hayward situation than not. Still so many differences that I would say they're still not really in the same category. Namely that Keontae George has already established himself as a star, whereas Gordon Hayward had not established himself as a star, but they were really quite far apart on extensions negotiations. And then Gordon Hayward had a fabulous year, goes into restricted free agency. The rest is history. So if we let Keontae George go into restricted free agency, maybe that doesn't have a happy ending for Utah. So maybe Utah is more incentivized to give him a nice extension now to keep him a little happier. That's the part that is, I think, an under-discussed mystery. So after Walker Kessler's restricted free agency resolves, and after we sign whatever free agents need to be added to this team to make us better, all eyes will be shifted on Keontae George. So that's another touch point along the way. Summer League, obviously can't wait for that. Utah Jazz always host their own Summer League. We're very fortunate fans to be able to have that. We're going to have a draft pick in the building to do so, to make those games more exciting. And certainly plenty of Bez Mbang and Hayden Gray on that Summer League team. Those will be names, guys to remember for a long, long time. My basketball sicko reference games and stuff that you could play. Elite ball knowledge. Hayden Gray is going to be number one at the top of the list for a long time for me. And then preseason, we're back in it for a contending Jazz team. Guys, I'm over. Don't tell me I'm over my skis. I don't care. Or go ahead and tell me. That's the whole point of the show, so you can respond to me. Jazz are fringe title contenders next year. I'm sorry. I'm too excited for this. Watching these playoffs as we're going into it, yes, they're remarkably high-level teams, but a lot of these teams are going in banged up, and the Lakers have no hope in their first round because they're so banged up. But then they draw Houston, who has a clogged toilet offense, who looks like shit. It's making me question if Ime Udoka is the right man for the job. If you told me like this year's Utah team was playing that Houston team or that Lakers team, the Jazz are winning those series in 5 or 6 games, baby. Let's go. And then you draw Denver, Minnesota, San Antonio in the second round. Give me a fighting chance. Okay. And then you draw the Oklahoma City Thunder in the Western Conference Finals, and they're missing Chet Holmgren for an injury, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander misses 2 or 3 games. All of a sudden, the Jazz win that series in 6 or 7 games. Oops, they're in the finals. All right. And with that, this has been Salt City Hoops, the final episode of the 25-26 regular season. I've been with you every step of the way. We've had some guests along the way. This has been, I think, an 8.5 out of 10 joyous season. We've had so much good things happen to us as fans this year. We were rewarded with the end of the tunnel of this tanking. We are going to be a successful team next year. I'm just so happy to have had you along for the ride. Please follow me wherever I am. Again, this is not the end of everything, but it's just nice to have a little end of the show here. Follow me everywhere. I'm Mark Russell Pereira, Salt City Hoops on both of those accounts everywhere. Drop some comments on YouTube. Drop some comments on Spotify, or get after us on social media. You know the drill. This has been such a blast for me this year. Can't wait to give you great off-season content. Can't wait to talk about the playoffs. Can't wait to do individual player recaps, too. We'll probably bring in some guests to talk about what they thought about player performances this season, give out some grades, that sort of thing. But the regular season is finally over. 82 games are over. And we'll see what's next. Thank you for hanging out with me, Mark Pereira. Catch you on the next Salt City Hoops podcast. Have a good day.